As Lent approaches, it's good for us to reflect on our sinful state. It is good for us to reflect in preparation for the great season of Lent, where we attempt to do penance for our sins and to turn over a new leaf on a spiritual level, to fast and do all the rest of the things Catholics have always done during Lent. So with that aim in mind, I bring back Padre Pio, who you will hear great sorrow in his voice here, in his words, as I read them to you, when he speaks of fearing that he does not love God sufficiently, that his own sinfulness, if you can even fathom those words applied to a saint, that his own sinfulness has made God grow weary of forgiving him. Padre Pio very much worried for his own eternal fate. You hear that in his letters here. This is an excerpt from a letter of his that he wrote to his own spiritual director, I believe it was the Father Superior of his religious order. And he speaks about how his confessor grows tired of hearing from him, and how he himself grows tired of hearing the homilies given by a priest who he confides in, who tries to make him feel better by writing and delivering homilies that don't get to the heart of the problem. A saint had these concerns, but what he never had was doubt in God himself. His doubts were about himself, his own wretchedness. It's Padre Pio on something we should all consider in our own lives. Care persiti me conterem tibi, et factus sum mihi mepsit gravis. So cries my soul from the depths of the wretchedness in which its God has placed it. My soul has been placed by the Lord to waste away in suffering. My state is bitter, it is terrible, and it is extremely frightening. All is dark, around me and within me. Darkness in the intellect, distress in the will. I am troubled in the memory. The thought of faith alone keeps me standing. On the inside I am suffering, and at the same time I am afflicted by and longing for the divine love. Is this state I am in a grace, or does it indicate eternal abandonment, God's eternal withdrawal from me, on account of the continual indignation that my life causes to him? Will my spirit find in God a loving Father, who always welcomes it, a severe judge who will condemn it? I am not in a position to know this. O terrible darkness! O terrible uncertainty! I am almost unable to stand it any longer. The hand of God lies more heavily upon me. To die would be a relief. In this state, it torments me especially to see that I am not worthy of God, and I never will be, because I see my ugliness plainly and clearly. I know also in the clearest possible way that I am completely unworthy of God and of any creature. My soul sees lining up before it, one by one, all those evils by which it made itself guilty before God. And in this lineup it sees with its own eyes things which it will never have been. Now the soul understands what the royal prophet said. You correct man for iniquity, and you make his soul waste away like a spider. Propter iniquitatem corpusti hominem et tabascere feciste sicut areneam animeam eius. But this fortunate man whom the prophet is speaking about is accepted by God, and what he experiences is God's merciful touch, giving him new favors, not bringing punishment. If only God wanted it to be so for me also. Affected by this thought and this burden, my soul is so distant from thinking that it is favored by God, that it seems the minimal amount of support that remained has now disappeared, along with everything else, and there's not a single soul able to pity it. Most pitiable state that fills me full of the greatest confusion. I would like to hide from God's eyes and from the eyes of all his creatures. I would like to hide from myself, so great is the pain that my wretchedness, my imperfection, my poverty causes me that they drown my whole spirit in darkness. But, Father, I myself cannot describe to you my present state. If you want a brief description of my interior state, pause a little and consider what the prophet Jonah says of himself, for exactly the same can be said of my own state. You cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, but will I yet see your holy temple? Note, Father, that neither in my case has all hope disappeared. The waters closed in over me, the deep surrounded me, weeds were wrapped around my head, I descended to the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Have look as well at what the royal prophet says of himself. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my soul. I sink in deep mire, where there is no foothold. I have tried to right myself in the sea, and the flood sweeps over me. I am weary with my crying, my throat is parched, my eyes grow dim with waiting for God. Behold, O Father, the faithful expressions of my deplorable state, expressed so exactly by those great saints of the first covenant. My suffering is most agonizing and can only be compared to the pains of someone who is denied any air and unable to breathe. Oh, God forbid that you should find this comparison exaggerated. I must add in honor of the truth that it is rather pale when compared to the suffering I experience. In truth, I am full of sorrow, and there is not one part of me that is not deeply distressed. The sensitive part is in a bitter and terrible aridity. The powers of the soul are all empty of all their apprehensions, and this fills me with the greatest fear. The spirit lies in the black darkness, and the body itself is not excluded from all these sufferings. The pain, even though it is not physical but entirely spiritual, doesn't allow the body to escape participation, and it participates to a high degree, in a way that is completely new and unknown. In this state there arises such pain between the soul and body that it is impossible for me to give an illustration of it. But long live God! If these sufferings weren't tempered at God's command by his orders, they being the greatest when I am at my strongest, my life would be unraveled in a very short time. But the deepest bitterness is experienced only in small doses. In certain instances, my Father, it is so awful that the soul seems to see hell and eternal damnation open up beneath its feet. Alas, who will free me from all this misfortune? Who will sustain me? Who will remember me in my poverty, my excesses, my bitterness, and in my rancor? God's fury, O Father, is certainly upon me, and all his waves, as the prophet says, have overwhelmed me. God is distanced from me, my friends, and those I know, and all hold me in abhorrence. I do nothing but struggle and weep by day and night. The Father Provincial in whom I have confided regarding my current state enjoined complete silence on me, and I don't know why. My confessor rebukes me, and I find no comfort in his long homilies on this subject. He has much to say when he explains about all the causes for comfort there are and how I must hold on to them. He speaks well of all the good things that these evils are producing in my soul, enumerating them one by one. I am not able to calm myself, and I am unable to believe him. This is because I am totally soaked and immersed in all the experiences of my evils, and I see clearly all my miseries. And on the other hand, I know that he doesn't see them or feel them as my own soul feels and sees them, which means I know for myself that not all he says applies to me. And so, my dear Father, instead of consolation, I receive greater torment. As you see, I climb the summit of Calvary on my own, deprived of every heavenly and every human comfort. If I could at least pray or cry out, it seems that Jesus rejects my prayer. He threatens me and drags me around in the darkness, and not towards the light. He reveals all my poverty under the rod of his indignation. His hand lies continually on me, and this hand is so heavy and unbearable that, as Jeremiah says, it has made my flesh and my skin waste away and broken my bones. Oh, how heavy this divine hand is, my Father, a hand that is, when all things are considered, still the hand of a loving Father. What will this hand be for those unfortunate ones, for those who find themselves in hell? I plead, but his hand always pushes me away. He confines me to the darkness, like the everlasting dead. His hand is raising a building about me, which surrounds me with bitterness and weariness. His hand can no longer be endured. It squeezes me ever more tightly in its shackles. This blessed hand turns everything upside down. It crushes everything and leaves me utterly desolate. What does the Lord want me to do with me? Will the outcome of my days be in the Lord's ways? And as I raise my humble prayer to God from the bottom of my heart, Nolla multa fortitude condente mecum nec magnitatis se male me premat. I turn also to you so that you might in all sincerity and frankness talk to me in the Lord. Tell me frankly, I am ready for anything. Can I still hope for salvation from the mercy of the Lord? What have I ever done to call such misfortune down on me? Will my sorrow yet sing a song of victory, or will it have to tell forever the vigorous of God's justice it experiences? Is it possible that I love God? Listen, Father, amongst all the torments that make my soul waste away, the first place is occupied by the unremitting grief or worry caused by the thought of God, which leads me to suppose that I do not love him or truly serve him. I find Padre Pio to be useful to anchor ourselves in a very stark reality. It seems all too often that saints, at least these days in the church, are portrayed as kind of happy-go-lucky. They had an assurance of their salvation, they knew they were saved, and all the rest of that not Catholic and not even vaguely Christian sentiment. That's how they're often portrayed to us today. Reality is, most saints would have told you that the greatest sinner that they had ever encountered in their own lives was themselves. That is something to think about, an attitude I think that is far more Catholic. That while we can be certainly concerned with things going on in the church, with shepherds who are not shepherds, with bishops who are more inclined to subvert the social order in return for profit, and with a pope who many openly doubt he is even truly pope. When you have that situation, it is truly good to be aware of things and to worry about them and to pray on them, but never lose sight of the most important thing in all of this, the salvation of your own soul. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. So to sharing this on social media, that helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.